Good afternoon. Welcome to our Douglas and Sarah Allison Auditorium. And of course, we welcome those who join us on our heritage.org website. For those here in-house, we would ask that you check that our mobile devices of various types have been silenced or turned off as a courtesy. And for those watching online now and in the future, you're welcome to send questions or comments at any time, simply emailing speaker@heritage.org. Hosting our discussion this afternoon is Kelsey Harkness. Kelsey is our senior news producer in the Daily Signal here at the Heritage Foundation. She covers education reform and social issues. Her work includes on-camera interviews, information graphics, and documentaries as well. She has been featured by The Drudge Report, The Federalist, Breitbart, Newsweek, and Fox News Channel. Before joining us here at Heritage in 2014, she was at the Fox News Channel in New York City. She was a production assistant there before writing and producing videos for Fox News Magazine, a lifestyle website. Please join me in welcoming Kelsey Harkness. Kelsey?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the Heritage Foundation today. We are so happy to host you here. As John mentioned, my name is Kelsey Harkness, and I am a senior news producer and reporter here at the Daily Signal. Today, I have the honor of introducing you to Philem McAleer and Anne McClenny, authors of the new book, Gosnell, The Story of America's Most Prolific Serial Killer. In addition to writing this book that we have right here and outside for sale after this event, Anne and Philem are the producers and directors of the movie Gosnell, which brings this text to life in the documentary Frack Nation. Both of them probably don't remember this, but I had the honor of meeting them and hearing them speak last April at the Heritage Foundation's annual resource bank. At the time, I thought I was walking into your typical pro-life activist event, not to say there's anything wrong with that, but within minutes, I realized that this was something much different. The truth is, these people sitting next to me are activists, are not activists, they are storytellers. They are investigative journalists, and they are truth tellers. As you'll soon discover, they are quite the characters as well. They, sort of like myself not too long ago, were skeptical of the pro-life activists. They looked at them with the same critical eye that any journalist should and would. That's why when I heard them speak about their work on the Gosnell investigation, I was truly taken aback. They weren't telling me how I should feel about these horrors. They were simply telling me the facts. As a reporter who believes in the power of storytelling to change hearts and minds, I appreciated this, and I now look up to both of them for their bravery in pursuing a story of this regard. Accounts like those of Kermit Gosnell hardly need the work of opinion writers. The horrors, quite sadly, speak for themselves. But they do and will always need the work of investigative journalists who are willing to devote years of their lives to making sure that truth is heard. McAleer and McClenny have never given up in their efforts to share this story, despite it probably feeling like the world, including Hollywood, of course, where they're from, is working against them. And let's admit, the final product is not exactly your weekend beach read. But today, I think everyone in this audience is here to tell you both that your efforts are not going unnoticed, and they're truly making a difference in the debate over abortion in this country. They're framing this issue in a way that, sadly, nobody ever really thought possible. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome both of them to the stage and thank them for their unrelenting efforts to pursue the story of Gosnell, America's most prolific serial killer.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. We've had quite the day. The really good news is that we're number 4 on the Amazon bestsellers for the United States of America.
Yeah, without one mention of the book in anywhere in the mainstream media, it's amazing. This has not been mentioned in any of the establishment medias, and it went straight into number 3. It's now at number 4 in the Amazon bestsellers. There's a real hunger. I think Kelsey put it correctly. There's a real hunger for truth, and that's what we're here to do. I mean, this is a factual book. This tells the facts, relies heavily on transcripts, evidence, investigations, and the truth is pretty shocking. The truth speaks for itself, and the truth is compelling, I think.
So we're going to do a couple of things, and I'm going to read part of the book eventually, a couple of pieces. But I think even the background, how we came to this story, is kind of interesting and kind of bizarre. And for people of faith, I think the word providence is actually appropriate, and not everyone is. And actually, faith shouldn't be an issue with this, actually. But for those that feel like that, I think there's something providential in the fact that Phelim was in Pennsylvania with Frack Nation and travelling around and had a few days off, and was in Philadelphia and heard about this local crime story. And instead of doing what any normal Christian would do when they have a few days off and like go to the pub or hang out or whatever, he went to the courthouse and walked into this courtroom and
well, I walked into the courtroom, and I've been a journalist for, I don't want to say how long, 25 years, but I'm probably lying, probably longer. And I walked in, and in front of me there were the pictures of the victims of Kermit Gosnell, the babies, were on a wall the size of that, projected up on a wall. Gosnell was sitting in front of me, the jury was there, and then I was listening to evidence that was the most shocking I'd ever heard. But the most shocking part of the courtroom was not in front of me, it was behind me. The courtroom was empty. There was a couple of local journalists, there was a couple of people knitting. I don't know why they were there, but they were
there were
knitting.
some Mennonites knitting, which I think is actually a nice thought.
Yeah,
I think.
and then I just realised that I couldn't. Well, I could work out why they weren't covering the story, but I just thought it was a gross breach of what journalism is about, to bring these terrible stories to light, to give a voice to the voiceless. I mean, and the pictures on the screen were of babies that had lived for minutes, seconds, maybe an hour, a couple of hours. No one had told their story, and their stories were important. One of Gosnell's victims, Carnamaya Munger, was a Bhutanese refugee. She'd spent 20 years in a refugee camp before coming to the United States. It must have been an amazing experience for her. 3 months later, she was dead, murdered by Kermit Gosnell, and no journalist wanted to tell her story.
Before we get there, I think we should say that Phelim then came back to Los Angeles to me, his wife, and to Magdalena Segeda, who is our business partner and is wonderful. And he said, this is the only thing we have to do now. This is the only thing that we have to do this now. And we both said, no, we want nothing to do with abortion. And really didn't want anything to do with it. And we're really clear about that. We actually had investment for another film that we wanted to do, and we'd actually got money, which is almost impossible. And we were really clear, there was absolutely no way we were going to do this, none. And what Phelim did was highly manipulative. He got in touch with the court and got them to send the 3 days of the transcripts for the 3 days that he had been in the court. And he just said, please just read the court transcripts. And then if you still think the same, we'll have to go with that. And, as they say, the rest is history. And we did read the 3 days of those transcripts. And the book uses an awful lot of references to the court because people spoke under oath. This isn't an activist. I just thought of this the other day, and it's kind of an interesting fact. There are no activists interviewed in this book. There's no voice of an activist in the book, basically. Actually, that's slightly incorrect. There's some voices of people, actually, at the memorial service at the end of the book. But other than that, the book is witnesses. It's the people who worked there. It's women who had abortions there. It's relatives of people who
It's forensic evidence. Yeah.
And it's good abortion doctors. We have the words of good abortion doctors under oath describing what a good abortion is, which I think is priceless. Because where do you have that? I think one of the problems and one of the things that I came to with this was that I didn't trust pro-lifers. I thought, and I think there is always a problem with activists not being believed because you've got a bias. So people are going to, you'd say that anyway, The people who spoke in the court were not pro-life activists. And the good abortion doctor was not an activist. And he was asked to describe a good abortion so that the jury could make the distinction between a good abortion and murder. And the jury were very shocked by what a good abortion was. And the good abortion doctor was asked, the first question he was asked was, they had to establish his expertise. You know the way they do that. Why are you giving evidence? Why, what do you know? So how many abortions have you performed in your career? And the answer was 40,000. And that's the noise that the jury made. The only time they made a noise, through all the things that they saw, they made a noise for that.
All the horrific evidence, all the pictures, there was no gasp, but they gasped at that one time in the courtroom because people don't know what goes on behind the doors of an abortion clinic, and they don't know the industrial aspect of it. And then the abortion doctor was asked to describe what a good abortion was. And
it's extraordinary, and it's under oath, and it's under pain of perjury, and it was kind of, it's kind of we find our humour where we can in the story, and it's not easy, but I make the point to Phelim that in the movie, when we were writing the script for the movie, I was like, the big thing was, really important that gets into the movie, that's in the movie, that description of abortion from the good abortion doctor will be in the movie, because no one's ever done that before. And Phelim says, there might be a reason why nobody ever did that in the movie before. But it's in our movie, I can tell you, and it's in this book, and I think it's really valuable because it's not an activist, so it's just telling you how it is when it's done right. And, and one of the questions that came up in the courtroom, which is just unbelievable, is, but what if you make a mistake? What if you make a mistake and the baby's born alive? Like, what do you do then? And the witness is pressed on this, but it never happens, Well, what if it did happen? Like, what would happen if it did happen? And the answer is, well, we would issue comfort care. We would give comfort care. And then that person is asked to describe what comfort care is. And that's where you just leave the living baby, and eventually it'll just die of dehydration.
Actually, here's the quote. And if the baby was born alive, as it often was, it was Dr. Fuselin, who's the good abortionist. She was clear what would happen at her hospital, which strictly adhered to the law. So this is what happens if you're doing an abortion on a baby. And in Pennsylvania, it's 24 weeks. Lots of babies are born prematurely at 24 weeks and survive. In other parts of America, by the way, in at least 5 states, you can have an abortion up to 40 weeks. So if you make a mistake and the baby is born alive, she says, it depends, this is under oath, on the gestational age. But as a human being, you would want to comfort, at least comfort care. So all these journalists were in the courtroom going, comfort, what's comfort care? What would that be? I've never heard of that. So she was pressed on it. And, what's comfort care? If it's in a hospital, you could potentially offer like over 23 weeks. But, you will resuscitate it, you just keep it warm, it will eventually pass. So Colonel Gosnell was being charged with murdering a baby with a pair of scissors that was born alive, but it's perfectly illegal to let a baby die of neglect and dehydration. And that was the good abortionist. That's under oath. That's not pro-life activism. That's someone who makes their living at it.
So, so we wrote this book because we think stories like that are not generally known. And I think the other thing that we think is not generally known is the law in America is not generally known. And I think Planned Parenthood are really clever and really talented, actually. Because they've managed to have a situation where basically no one in America knows the law. I've had stand-up rows with extremely intelligent, well-informed women who tell me I'm wrong about the law in Pennsylvania because they're from Pennsylvania. And they're really politically astute. And they say, there's no way you can have an abortion at 6 months in Pennsylvania. And that is the law. So people don't know the law. And I think that's a really clever move. For me, that's incredibly clever of Planned Parenthood. And I think anyone who cares about this issue, that should be the one thing I would tell everyone. That's the first thing you should put on top of your agenda. Just tell people what the law is. And what I find surprising is that the law in this country can only be compared to the scummiest places on the planet. So nowhere in Europe has laws like here. The socialists wouldn't do it. But North Korea has similar laws to here.
China.
And I just think people don't know that. And I actually think not telling them is a huge mistake. Because the jury, who were not pro-lifers in this case, when they found out the law, they didn't like it. And they thought the law should be changed. So I think it's a big secret, and I think it's an interesting thing to keep it as a secret, and I don't think people who care about this should be keeping it as a secret anymore. And it's funny, I spoke in Oregon, and I actually said that to the Oregon Right to Life group, who are rock stars. If they're watching, I just love those people. They actually put up billboards that say that. They just tell the law. They just say what the law is in Oregon. And Oregon, of course, is a special place, which also has euthanasia. So, yeah, it's all happening in Oregon.
Yes, kill you at both ends, you know.
But you know, yeah, so I want to tell a couple of stories, but I also want to say that the book is, and this is, I mean, given what we've just said, the book is actually very inspirational. Because in the middle of all of this, there are really good people who did a really good thing and made sure that this guy went to prison forever. And we try and celebrate them, and particularly the first chapter with Detective Wood, who is this undercover narcotics officer, who's the guy who cared more than the whole of the Department of Health in Harrisburg, who couldn't care less, even though 2 women died. Can you imagine? 2 women died. 2 women died, and the Department of Health in Harrisburg didn't get off their bums to go and investigate. Can you imagine if somebody, imagine if you went to a burger joint in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, a burger joint, and then you came out and you were like, none of us are well now. Everyone's got tummy aches and all. They would investigate that. They'd close the restaurant down and they would investigate that. They'd care about that. So the bodies were piling up in the basement. There were severed feet of babies in jars that could be easily found if you'd walked in. There were cats walking around, also in the procedure rooms, and he was eating cornflakes while he did procedures. So anyone who walked in, it was all there. It was all there to see, and no one did anything about it. But this Detective Wood, he's just a complete, amazing guy, and he is just great. And he is the guy. He is the reason. He is the reason that Gosnell is in prison, and he needs to be celebrated. And he is the hero of the movie, played by Dean Cain. He doesn't look even remotely like Dean Cain, but he's a Superman. He's actually a Superman. That's what his own daughter said that to us.
So he like us actually stumbled across this story. It was a drug case. He's a undercover drugs investigator, and he was Gosnell. In addition to being a butcher, was also the biggest supplier of legal drugs in Pennsylvania. He supplied OxyContin.
Mixed with cough syrup is apparently fabulous. Just putting it out there. Don't do drugs.
So he managed to turn some of Gosnell's staff into confidential informants. And whilst they were telling him how Gosnell did his drug operation, they also mentioned that a woman had died during one of the procedures. And he got her name. And you know, if you are called to if there's an unexplained hospital visit anywhere in Pennsylvania, the police have to be notified, and there has to be a police number, and your name has to go on it. And so he put this woman's name. She went into this clinic healthy, and then died, and went to hospital. So he put her number into a name into a police database. Zero, nothing. He couldn't believe it. He didn't know what was happening. So he made his mission to find out what happened to this refugee, this woman who came here, and he became, as one of the prosecutors said, he became her champion.
He was the only one. Christine Wexler said that. He was Carnamaya Monger's champion. He was the only one. It's just great. Isn't that great? Imagine that, if you could live a life and know that you did that one thing, but he did a lot more than that. But this is who this guy is. He's a friend of ours, just saying. And by the way, we go to Philadelphia now, and basically everyone that he's related to are in the cops. We get escorted to the airport and everything, because we're really connected now. Yeah, you can say, yeah. So we've got the whole Philly thing sorted out very well there.
Yes.
It's actually quite funny. I mean, actually, genuinely, he's got one brother who kind of brought us to the airport. His other brother, runs security at the airport. And they're all over the place. He's from a family of 11. He's just great. He's just great. Yeah. Fabulous. Anyway.
And it wasn't...
The whole first chapter is about him and his life and all the things that have happened to him. And he's just great. And he's had a whole lot of awful stuff happen to him. And he's super good fun, and he's just great.
It wasn't without cost for him either, because as a narcotics officer, he was getting involved in a homicide, and cops are territorial. Prosecutors are territorial, but he wanted to see this through, and he wanted to find out what was happening, and he wanted justice for this woman. And he stumbled into the biggest case of his career because he knew something wasn't right. And, common sense is a wonderful thing. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but the night of the raid, when they raided...
Oh, yeah. No, you should tell that.
When they raided the clinic, and they saw the cats, and they saw the blood on the walls, and they saw the rusted equipment, and they saw the smell was disgusting, and they saw the severed feet. One woman was in the middle of an abortion, and the health bureaucrats, the experts, said to Dr. Gosnell, who was being held by these guys, she said, you have to let him go now. He needs to finish the procedure. And they're going, he's the perpetrator. He can't finish the procedure. And he goes, no, he's not under arrest, so therefore he has to. And he was going, take it to the hospital. No, he has to finish. So they had a stand-up row. And it was the street cops who said, you can't allow this to happen. This cannot go ahead. And it was the experts who said, oh, no, it's perfectly okay.
The nurses.
They knew,
The nurses.
he knew, and she said, you're just saying that because you're a cop. And he says, no, I'm saying it because I'm a human being.
That's what Jim said. So there's a couple of very nice stories. Do you want to hear a good story before you hear another bad story? Because I think a good story is a good idea. So this whole grand jury system, which is very unusual and very American, and it usually is used when a case is extremely complicated and they're trying to work out what are we looking at here. So there was a grand jury in this case that sat for over a year, and you can imagine how awful it was for them. They're trying to go through all of this material, including incredible photographs, which we've seen, and just very disturbing stuff. But people were coming in all the time and telling their stories. And so one woman came in and she told this story. And she told it to Christine Wexler. And so the story was that she was late-term abortion, which is a 3-day procedure. And she had gone for the first day and had the first thing done. And the doctor said to her, she spoke, and Gosnell was there, and she said to Gosnell, what happens to the babies afterwards? And he said, we burn them. And you go home after the first day and you come back the next day and then you go home the next day and then you come back the third day for the actual abortion. And so she went home and became very troubled by the whole thing, talked to her cousin. And the cousin actually phoned Gosnell, who screamed at her and said, you're not getting your money back. And then Christine Wexler said to her in the grand jury, and the grand jury is like 35, 40 people sitting in a room with their knitting and their shopping and all that. Christine Wexler said to her, well, what happened? And she said, oh, my baby started kindergarten today. And the grand jury stood up and applauded for the first time in anyone's memory. And we call that one, I like to call that the one that got away. And we feature that story in the movie because we think people need that. And it's actually, and it's true, and it happened, and it's just a great story. Yeah, the grand jury was quite they were great, and everyone complimented them because they had to go through all this extraordinary stuff, including the results from the 47 bodies. So 47 bodies were found in the premises the night of the raid, and some of them were mummified and some dehydrated, so they had to be rehydrated. That became a whole problem from Emmy's point of view, trying to work them out. And Christine Wexler, in one very famous scene that really happened, and it's in the book, she actually went to the Emmy's office and she held them. She held those babies, and she talked about it being a privilege to hold a person of that age. And she said they used to drink a lot of wine. All the people involved in the investigation, they were like, I mean, she's really funny. She's like, what's that actress called, the blonde? Reese Witherspoon. Yeah, she looks like Reese Witherspoon, and she has more energy. Like, she's all fired up, and she's really smart. And she's always she would say to her husband, "You do not come home without a bottle of wine," kind of thing. And she used to watch reruns of I Love Lucy. And she used to read, those romance things, those short, those romance books, those novellas. She used to read 4 in the night. And she'd stay up really late at night reading them. Because during the day she was sifting through all this evidence. And she was a mother herself with her own children, with her own small children, going to pick them up. And she was pregnant during the investigation. But she's a rock star. I mean, you can't believe what this girl is like. I mean, she's well able for this. She was amazing. And she would be telling us these stories. At one point, we were interviewing her in her house, in her garden, in a lovely house. And we're sitting out the back, and there's the children's swings and everything. And she's telling stories, and it's like the incredible incongruity of it. But what I found brilliant about doing this story was knowing that people like her exist. It would do you good, It would do you good to know that she exists and that Jim Wood exists, particularly when you've come up close and personal with all the other people. It's really good that there's that balance, and that in the end, the truth and justice won in this case, and that he can't hurt anyone else anymore. But there is something very inspirational about these people. They're wonderful. And Joanne Pescatori and Ed Cameron, who tried the case, just amazing. I mean, the other thing that, we wanted to do that we thought was very important with writing the book was to tell, to the greatest extent we possibly could, to tell the stories of the children who lived and died. So baby boy A was very significant, as you probably know. So he shares a birthday with my father, the 12th of July, and he lived and died on the 12th of July, 2008. And his story is really spectacular in a lot of ways, and very powerful, and anyone who knows it is changed by it, and won't forget baby boy A in a hurry. And you know that his photograph is online. It's on the internet. I don't show it. We don't show it, and we don't show it in the movie. And for all kinds of reasons, like the child has privacy, but if you want to see it, it's online. And all you do is put in baby boy A and Gosnell, and you'll see it.
But be careful.
Don't do it unless you really want to. And it's very interesting. When I travel around the country, I ask audiences. I used to say to audiences, if I'm going to show a photograph now, if you want to whatever, right? If you want to leave or put your hand over your face or whatever. And then I started I started going to places, and I say to people, I'm actually not going to show any photographs, and people applauded. People would applaud me for that. So people aren't up for it. Not everyone's ready for that. And so there's a government health warning with that, but it's there for those people who, want to know more. So I'm going to try and tell a little of the story based on what we wrote in the book about baby boy A. And I always find this a little challenging, even though obviously I wrote it and I've read it a lot and I know it very well. So I'm going to just do a few pieces. So Cross, Karima Cross is one of the workers. According to Cross, Abrams is the mother of the baby. Abrams was heavily sedated when she was taken into the procedure room, and the baby just came out. Gosnell was in the room. The baby was about 18 inches long. Gosnell put the baby boy in a Tupperware container. He was still breathing. Gosnell did not cut the baby's neck immediately. He was so big that his arms and legs hung over the side of the container. Cross testified about what happened next. And this is from the court, yeah? He put it in a shoebox, and the baby was hanging over the shoebox, but the baby some way came together, she said. Pescatore asked Cross to show the court what the baby did. The baby just came together, and the picture, it shows that the baby was just in the shoebox like this, Cross replied. Judge Meinhardt wasn't quite following. When you say came together, he interjected, what do you mean? Because when Dr. Gosnell put the baby in the shoebox, Cross repeated, the baby was hanging over the shoebox. Pescatore asked Cross to stand up in the courtroom and to show how baby boy A curled up in the container, and she crouched into a fetal position. The jury was stunned. When the lights in the courtroom were dimmed and the photograph of baby boy Abrams was finally shown, there was silence. And then, three of the workers in the clinic took a photograph of baby boy A, and it was important because in the end, that's what really put Gosnell in prison. And during the trial, Joanne Pescatore spoke very, very emotionally about the photograph and about the significance of the picture that Adrian Moten took. Adrian Moten also took a photograph of the infant who became known as baby boy A, and how it sealed Gosnell's fate. The murder of baby boy A proved a turning point for Moten, Adrian Moten. This baby was so large, Adrian Moten was one of the workers. This baby was so large, between 18 and 24 inches long, by Moten's reckoning, and that she snapped a picture on her phone before Gosnell took him out of the room in a shoebox. Moten said she knew she was taking a picture of a young human. In fact, that's why she took the photo. It was a big baby boy. This is her in the court. It was a big baby boy. He had that colour that a baby has. I just felt he could have had a chance. He could have been born any day. I took the picture, she told us. I remember coming home and I showed it to my mom, and I said, the doc has lost his mind. This is ridiculous. She knew the photo represented a madness that was present at 3801 Lancaster Avenue, and she also had a feeling that it was going to be important someday. I never got rid of that phone. To be honest, I just couldn't get rid of it. I had a feeling that this was going to come to the surface. I just didn't know when. So when the police came, I gave them the phone. I said, there's a picture in there. Do whatever you have to do with it, because now I'm free of it. I'm free. Investigators needed to send the phone to the FBI headquarters in Quantico to retrieve the photograph. I think it's good to know that story, even though I know it's a hard story and it's very upsetting, but I think it's really important. And I think it's really important that, you know, somebody interviewed me. So I had a kind of a little row last night. I won't even tell you who it's in the green room at Fox. But anyway, somebody said to me, and I'm not going to say who, but somebody said to me, oh, this is all covered. This is all done. This is all covered.
Why are you still talking?
You know, why are you still talking about this? Because somebody had said, oh, what are you doing here? A famous person. Said, what do you, you know, and I said, you know, whatever. And the famous person said, oh, that was all done. That was all covered. You know, Fox did all that. And I said, no. I said, nobody in America knows Samika Shaw's name. Nobody in America knows Carnamaya Monger's name. Nobody knows the full story of the birth and the death and the life of baby boy A, and they should.
We know Michael Brown's
And we know Michael Brown's story. Everyone knows Michael Brown. Here's who Michael Brown was. He assaulted a man in a shop who ran a small little shop, and then he stole stuff from that shop. Then he walked in the middle of a road, and then he tried to beat a police officer to death in the police officer's car, and he died. And that's the story of Michael Brown. And they're going to put a statue up to him in Ferguson. So Samika Shaw is a black woman of 22, she's a 22-year-old mother, and she's dead. And no one's talking about it, and there's no memorial to her. Carnamaya Monger lived in a Bhutanese, she's a Bhutanese refugee who lived in a Nepalese refugee camp for 20 years before she came here and died 4 months later. No one knows who she is. I mean, there's, you know, so let's just say I quite firmly said that to the person in the room, and that person...
Quite firmly.
Quite firmly. I was a bit nervous. I was going on O'Reilly. It was a big deal. And but they didn't really come back at me after that, did they? No, not so much. So...
I wonder why.
Shocker. Shocker.
Convinced, no doubt.
You know, for those... The last chapter in the book, by the way, I wanted to say that too, because I'm going to try to say as much as I can, try to remember to say.
Well, can I just say, those victims... They are straight out of central casting for progressive victims. You know, imagine, let's have a victim that progressives could get behind. A black woman, 22-year-old black woman, mother of two, was it? From a poor part of West Philadelphia. A Bhutanese refugee, she was a genuine refugee. She'd spent 20 years in a refugee camp. In Nepal, and then she fled here. She got here on her refugee resettlement program, and she was here 3 months, and she was dead. These are classic central casting victims that liberals are supposed to care about. You could go to Huffington Post tomorrow, and nobody would know their names. They don't know they exist, but they will. They will.
So, actually, before I say the thing about the last part of the book, we have visited Gosnell in prison. He's in Huntington Prison in Pennsylvania, and I've spent quite a lot of time with him there. And it was funny. We said to Jim Wood, you know, we're going to get in touch with him, you know, because we should get in touch with him, find out more, and whatever. And I sort of said to Jim, you know, do you think he's going to respond to us? Do you think he'll see us? Whatever. And Jim is so wise. Like, you just know, you know, those cops, they know everything. They've seen everything and they know everything. They know people very well. And he said, here's what's going to happen. He'll be in touch with you until the day he dies.
In fact, I was worried that was my phone ring, and I was worried that
was probably him. He phones us all the time. He sends letters all the time. We have a massive pile of letters from him. And in fact, in the book, we've actually just, you know, photocopied or whatever, I don't know what the word is, printed out 2 of the letters that he sent to us, that they're actually included at the back of the book. And he, you know, he phones all the time. So we'll be like out walking or at a meal or something, the phone rings, would you like to accept charges from Huntington Prison? And of course the answer is yes. And, you know, and how are you? How's Anne? You know, and yeah, so we went to the prison, and it was exactly the opposite of what you'd expect somebody who has 3 life sentences, you know. So he's he's in great form.
Well, first of all, there's no plexiglass.
Plexiglass, yeah. So.
It's like, it's a low-lying table, and you're sitting there, and he can come around the table and sit right front of you, which is what he did. So I was sitting there, and Anne was sitting there, and he came in, and he sat right in front of Anne and stuck his legs around her and touched her.
And pulled right in, you know. And then when he was making a point, he put his hand on my leg all the time, and then would say, sorry about that, and put the hand on the leg. Knowing exactly what he was doing. But, and I'm like with my back up against the wall, so I'm kind of pushing myself back into the wall, but there's nowhere else to go. And I mean, you know, I mean, the scene in the prison was so bizarre, because as I said, I thought we'd kind of be in this plexiglass situation with the phone and all that. You know the way the movies are. You mustn't watch movies and we watch far too much crime, and they're always behind the plexiglass. So we're suddenly in this situation. And at one stage, Phelim, we were there before he came out, and so we're sort of sitting there because we suffer from terminal punctuality. So we're there like 20 minutes before the time, and so we're sitting there in this place. And then Phelim had to go to the restroom, which is like, really, this is what you're going to do to me now. So then I'm on my own there, right? And I'm sitting there, and I mean, seriously, there was a guy like in my line of vision, like over there, you know, like the guy with the huge neck, that actual guy, you know, the one, that he's sort of there and he's doing this mouthing to me, like he's going, like, I know you. And I'm kind of going, you gotta be joking. I'm sort of sitting there going, and somebody I'd read somewhere, you know, the way, you're reading up on how do you deal with, violent criminals. Yeah, don't have eye contact apparently is something, you know, so I'm kind of going, and then it came to 12 o'clock, which is the time he's meant to come, and then he arrived, and he's really tall and, you know, very straight-backed. He's 72 years old. He's an African-American, and actually I think this is a very funny part of it, actually. It's very funny. So we were doing this story for quite a while, like for a long time, and somebody said to me, you worried about being called a racist? And I said, like, what? And they were, you know, he's African-American. I was going, oh, yeah. And you know, I mean, I'm really not putting myself out as like some kind of special person. We had never noticed it. I had never noticed he was black. But he is black. I mean, obviously he's black. But you know the way, it's kind of an interesting psychology.
He's much more than a race.
The colour of him is obviously the least interesting thing. That it's like, had to be pointed out to us, and then we thought, oh God, he is black. But it was like, who'd ever mention that? I don't know, you know what I mean? It's like, it's not a thing. I suppose the only thing that it's a thing about is the fact that he's racist. So that, you know, in the clinic he had a special place for white women. So white women got a nice clean room where they kept everything up to date and everything, and the black women were just, you know, and he explained it. He was asked about it because a lot of the staff were black, and he was asked about it, and you know, he said, well, that's just the way things are. But what we think it is that he felt that the white women had more money, and that maybe they would be, if anything went wrong, that they would be more
likely to complain. You
know, and that he was kind of whatever. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, I just think it's kind of a classic one, you know, that somebody said he's black, you know, and I'm going, he is. But anyway, so we're there, and he comes down, and I can't believe, you know, it's just amazing. His demeanour was like he'd been playing golf. Like, he's super relaxed. It's like I'd played 18 holes of golf and was having a gin and tonic. Like, he's super relaxed. And, how are you? Great. And super quiet spoken, and you know what I'm really disappointed about? You know what I'm really disappointed about? I'm just really disappointed I didn't get into the poetry class.
It's full.
That's the real problem. The poetry class was already full when I got here. But I am part of the Nation of Islam. And I am reading the Quran in 2 different translations. And, you know, and this kind of random stuff, but I am a Christian, you know. I am a Christian. So he's doing this kind of, do you remember that very funny Woody Allen film where the guy was trying to find all the different religions? You remember that one? He's kind of doing that. It's like, you know, he's got a hand in all these religions, but he has his relationship with religion. I mean, he never spoke about God, he never spoke about prayer, or he never had there was no kind of spirituality. If anything, he was trying to use religion as a tool to explain himself. And in fact, in the book, Monsignor, you'll find it quite fascinating. At the very back of the book, he has a whole section of Bible passages that justify abortion, according to himself. And he has them with the references and then
the explanation.
What he thinks the explanation for them is.
But he can sing.
He can sing. So we have a friend, Boris Zelkin, who is a composer and composed the music for the movie. And Boris is a buddy of ours. And we knew that Gosnell had a whole thing about music. So he's, you know, an aficionado, according to himself. If the medicine hadn't worked out, he could have been a concert pianist. But he talks about himself in such lofty terms, you can't believe anything he says, because he's constantly telling you how intelligent he is. So we, you know, Boris had said to me, music's also a very interesting thing. It tells you stuff about people. Ask him about music, you know. I said to Boris, what do you think we should ask him? He said, ask him about music. And so we asked him about music, and he said, you know what's wonderful is, you know, I've been working so hard that it's wonderful to have a break. And, you know, I'm getting to listen to music a lot now, you know. And I listen to the Met You know, of course I've been to the Met. And he's kind of always letting name drop and, you know, I've been to the Met. You know, you probably haven't, but I have. You know, he sort of name drops and you're thinking, like, who is this for? And then he says, and you know what I've discovered? I've discovered Jacques Brel. And do you know how many people here, you guys know Jacques Brel, beautiful, like fabulous, Belgian crooner who died very, very young. He was a big smoker. And, but he had these wonderful songs. And so then Gosnell did this a few times when we were with him. He did this brain freeze thing, you know, the thing where like he could remember unbelievable details and then he'd go, what's that? And usually he would have his hand on my leg while he was doing the brain freeze. What's that name? What's the name? And so he says, like, what's the name? What's the name of that really famous Jacques Brel song? And I'm sitting there thinking, I know exactly what the song is. I'm thinking, do I tell him or do I just sit here? And I said, you know, so Ne me quitte pas, as probably some of you know, like it's super famous. And he then just like literally, I mean, he literally like leans right into my face and starts singing in French, Ne me quitte pas, you know, don't ever leave me. Yeah, so we got a couple of verses of that.
We left him.
We left him. We left him eventually.
He's still there.
He's still there. You know, and he said all kinds of disturbing stuff. We have a chapter called Meeting the Monster, which kind of details all of the stuff that he said. I mean, he's been to Auschwitz, and he had a word to describe Auschwitz that I don't believe anyone I've ever heard of who went to Auschwitz ever used. And the word was impressive. He thought it was really impressive. And he thought the collection of the children's shoes was really impressive. But he has a shoe thing. He has a big shoe thing. He talks about his feet an awful lot. And the cops told us that when he was initially held in Philadelphia, you know, and they're listening to the phone calls, that's how it's done. They're allowed to listen to whatever phone calls he has. He talked about his feet all the time. He'd be on phone calls with people saying, you know, these shoes, you know, these are really comfortable, and you know, I have really big feet, and like he was saying, look at how big my feet are. They're very wide, you know, and all these details about his feet and talking about his feet, and then he had the whole feet thing, obviously. The Auschwitz reference, and then of course, obviously, as you know, he cut the feet off the children and kept them in the jars. And you know, at different times, Karima Cross, who worked there but left before the raid, she took photographs as well years ago, and she had photographs, and her photographs show more photographs of babies' feet than the babies' feet that were found on the night of the raid.
So he had a great collection of them. He was a serial killer. He kept trophies.
Did somebody say something? I thought I heard something. No, okay. But so the whole prison thing was crazy. Do you want to read something there?
Well, no, I think we'll take questions.
Oh no, I want to tell one story before that. And because I haven't said it before in any other venue we've been to.
Actually, I suppose, does everyone know who Kermit Gosnell is?
I hope no.
Yes,
I hope you do.
Yeah,
now.
I mean, because you know, we
sometimes forget to mention that.
He's America's biggest serial killer. That's for everyone out there. He's serving 3 life sentences in Huntington prison. He's not in prison because he's an abortionist. He's in prison because he killed babies outside the womb with a pair of scissors. He was originally charged with 7 murders, convicted of 3 and manslaughter. He is thought to have killed hundreds, perhaps thousands, over a 30-year killing spree, and he was allowed to do it by bureaucrats who didn't enforce the regulations. And very interestingly, the biggest enabler of Kermit Gosnell was a Republican governor. So abortion clinics were Tom Ridge. Abortion clinics were inspected annually in Pennsylvania up until 1995, when Tom Ridge decided to run for governor. And do you remember the old days when you had to be a moderate to win Pennsylvania? Remember that?
Oh, ouch!
I think that has changed a little bit, but yeah, back you had to be a liberal moderate to win Pennsylvania. So So Tom Ridge ran as a moderate, pro-choice Republican, and he said, "We're not going to enforce the law." He actually said that. So the law was it had to be inspected every year. It was ineffectual anyway. So with Ridge getting in, Gosnell's clinic was not inspected for 17 years until the police raid. And it allowed him, that's when the women started dying, and that's when the bodies really started piling up. So in those 17 years, killed hundreds, perhaps thousands, but he was killing before that. So he is America's biggest serial killer.
So there were 47 bodies that were found on the premises. Obviously, some of those, and particularly the feet were identified. There was names on the feet of the mothers. And in one case, he had 2 feet, because some of them were just 1 foot, but in one case there were 2 feet of the one child. And can you imagine this? The cops got in touch with that woman, and and went to see her and said, "We have some news, and I'm sorry to tell you, but those feet are there." And the photograph is on the internet. The photograph of those feet with her, with pretty much you can really read her name. I'm not going to actually say it, but right now. But anyway, those feet. But people became aware of those bodies, and particularly people of faith felt that the children should get a burial, a Christian burial, that someone should pray over them. And I'm very much in favour of that. I thought that was wonderful. And the people who cared about that and made massive petitions to Philadelphia, in the end were ignored in a way. And the bodies were buried without ceremony, privately and quietly. And then afterwards, the city told the people who had petitioned, this is where they are. So they told them where they were. And there was a memorial service. I don't know if some of you probably know that. And I thought some of the words spoken at the memorial service were absolutely fabulous. And a number of people spoke. And as I said, this is the only place actually where there are pro-life voices, if you like. But I just thought one of the things that were said were amazing. Alliance Defending Freedom attorney Catherine Glenn Foster acknowledged that in the end, Philadelphia officials had fulfilled the wishes of all who wished to pay their respects to the babies. Today we can say that the city of Philadelphia has heard us. They gave these babies a place to be buried, she said. These babies were like every other precious little persons, Foster told the mourners gathered in the summer sun. How a person dies doesn't make them any less human. Try as hard as he might, neither their killer nor his infamy could erase these babies' humanity. We will use the sacred place to cry, to remember, and to say, this ends here. But actually, that's not the worst quote. Can you believe it? But the people who had petitioned for the babies' bodies felt that the city had let Gosnell's victims down. It was wrong. They said that the children had been buried secretly. The Reverend Patrick Mahoney, director of the Washington, D.C.-based Christian Defense Coalition, said at the memorial, okay, I'm going to go for this, right? I would simply say this to the medical examiner and the Philadelphia city government. These children were not unclaimed. We came for months after months seeking these children in love. They were not unclaimed. They were wanted. They were desired. They had meaning and purpose. It's a sentiment we share, is the last line of the book. And I think that's beautiful, and I think it's really a fitting place to end, that, that they are remembered. And the plan, by the way, is that there will be a permanent memorial there. I think right now there are flowers there, and people are great, and people did go and pray there, and I think there will be a permanent memorial, and that'd be great, So I think we should take questions, because that's probably, thank you. Oh, and you have to buy multiple copies of books. And
yes. So the media ignored the trial. They're now trying to ignore the book, even though it's now gone to number 4 in the Amazon bestseller list. So everyone out there, go to your local bookstore, go online, buy it. Let's stop the cover up. And I would be so happy if this gets into the New York Times bestseller list, because it'll be the only mention of Gosnell in the New York Times, and they're going to hate it. So let's, there are many things you should do for love, but that's one thing I would do for hate, is to buy this book. It's a great motivator, I think.
Are we any questions? Yes.
I'm not sure you're aware of it, but 2002, we brought forth a bill. 2002, we brought forth a bill to preserve the life of the child who survives the abortion, because we had cases of a child surviving, dying after 21 days. And when the question was raised, was there an obligation to preserve the life of the child? The answer given by Judge Hainsworth was no, that's not a child protected by state law. It's a fetus marked for termination. And the reason we brought it forth was precisely to break out the point that people didn't know that you can have an abortion through the entire length of pregnancy. Mm-hmm. Okay, we passed that bill, the media screened it out. The other side didn't give us an argument precisely so it wouldn't be covered. We went back to the bill in September of 2015. To restore the penalties that had been stripped. The vote was 248 to 177. This time, all the Democrats voted against it. This was never brought up in the campaign. The Trump campaign never used it. No Catholic in the media raised it. The blockage from the media. So yesterday, Senator Sass of Nebraska introduced the bill into the Senate to restore the penalty. I don't know if you heard about it, but yeah, because everything you've described now was on the scene 16 years. Jill Stanek, the live birth abortion. We deliver the baby whole and put in the refuse room to die. This was all known.
Yeah.
And the fact is, it's been blocked out.
Yeah.
And the question is, what will it take to restore? What I'd hope you perhaps is that you two would testify with your stories.
No,
When
we're
that
not.
bill-
We're not activists. We're journalists. We're telling a story. So
It's
I
a
think that,
powerful story if you care
It
about
is.
it.
No,
If you care about this issue and you're really concerned that you break through that, here are senators and congressmen who have been deaf to the story. You can bring that message to them if you really want to bring this message.
Yeah,
out.
no, I
And
think it's not a message, it's more of journalism. We would definitely talk about what we've discovered, and what we've discovered is what people don't know what goes on behind these doors. And the truth is important. It's not, and the truth doesn't have a side. And if people knew what goes on behind these doors, they would think differently.
I will make a quick note if we can take questions. We already are running late.
okay, I'm sorry.
We're fine,
Okay.
extending it
Yeah.
a few minutes, but let's
Yeah.
try to keep.
Please, thanks.
Hold on 1 second for the mic.
Sorry. Yep.
What impact do you think the movie particularly will have, and when does it come out?
As soon as possible is the answer to the second part of the question. We're trying to get distribution for the movie, but the movie, anyone who's seen it has been very complimentary and has said it's great. What impact do we have? Do we think it'll have? It's certainly going to start a major conversation that is overdue. And I think there's a lot of people who talk about abortion. There's an enormous number of people who don't talk at all about it. So
The movie will be an accessible way of finding out about this topic, but it's a crime procedural. It's not an activist movie, and it'll be an interesting way of stimulating a conversation.
yes. Where will it be shown? Oh, in movie theaters.
Yeah.
Yeah, traditional release is what we
This
want.
lady will take one from this lady as well.
Yeah, sir.
Yes, my name is Kami, but I'm with the Pakistani Spectator, and I'm Muslim, and I talk with some Muslim organization that how come they are so strongly pro-life, but once it's come to working for this cause, they do not align themselves with the Christian organization, and I'm told that both sides are not sincere. I mean, this is my own views, but they said it's very difficult to align. Muslim themselves with the Christian organization because they are not very tolerant. So, any comments about this? Thanks.
Well, we're not involved in the pro-life movement. We're journalists. Interestingly, there's a case about a Muslim father who lost his twin children there. It's a bit of a scandal in the book, and no one knew about it before. The Philadelphia Police Department knew about Gosnell killing children before 5 years before he was arrested. It was a Muslim man whose wife aborted their 8-month-old twins without his knowledge, and he reported it to the homicide department, and they ignored him. So maybe read the book, and you might find something to work with there. Let's get the microphone.
First of all, I definitely agree with Dr. Arcus that it would be very powerful if you could testify just as to your experience at a hearing on the bill, for whatever that's worth. The other thing is, I was wondering, were there any civil lawsuits that you know of that were filed in connection with this case?
Yes, the family of Carnamaya Munger have filed a civil lawsuit, and they got a significant award of several $1 million. But I don't know how they're going to get it. He was very interested in money. They had $250,000 in his house, and
17 houses.
and he owns 17 houses. But you know, getting from A to B on that is difficult. There were other lawsuits filed by other victims of his, but funny, Philadelphia seems to have very bad lawyers. A lot of the lawyers who represented the women have been disbarred or didn't file the right. I mean, it's this catalogue of errors and mistakes. They didn't file the right paperwork, or they were disbarred, or they stole the money. Like, there were several lawsuits like that, and it's. I don't think Philadelphia has a great infrastructure for legal infrastructure. Let's say.
Who's in charge? Yes.
So I have a question about the women that you were speaking of that were lost their lives in Gosnell's clinic. Do you think the state neglected them or neglected the stories because of where they lived and who they were?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very good question. The state in the Pennsylvania, the bureaucracy failed everyone. And I think there is a bigotry of low expectations definitely at play, where like the student nurses, for example, he had student nurses in there doing like their internships or whatever, and none of them complained, and none of them made complaints or went to the police about what they saw. And the ADA, Christine Wexler, thought that was extraordinary. Harrisburg.
They said
there were some complaints, though, weren't there?
Oh, no, there was tons of complaints. No, there were tons of complaints,
Right,
but nobody did anything about it. Right. So the Department of Health didn't do anything about it. For 17 years, 2 women died, and they didn't go across the threshold. They didn't walk across the threshold to see what happened. So huge neglect. You kind of saying, is it racism, kind of a poor part of Philadelphia? It's really hard to know. I think we definitely got the impression that Harrisburg didn't like having to get in their cars to go to Philadelphia. But I also think this Tom Ridge thing was a problem. There was a culture.
Political.
Hands-off abortion clinics, and the mayhem ensued. So it didn't help.
One more quick question. It has to do with the movie, actually. Could you talk about how your Indiegogo campaign came about? Because that was a huge success for the movie, right?
Yeah, we broke all kinds of records. I mean,
we raised $2.3 million from 29,000 people.
In 45 days.
Yeah, it's because the media tried to cover up the story, actually, and people were fed up with the media covering up, and we said this is an opportunity to tell this great story. As a journalist, we think it's a great story. Many people probably would use a different adjective, but it is a great story. It's got all the elements. It's got a serial killer. It's got a hero cop, hero lawyers. It's got a dramatic beginning, middle, and end. We just thought this was a movie treatment, and we were overwhelmed by the response of people.
I know you've visited Dr. Gosnell in prison several times. Can you talk about that experience and whether he ever indicated his motivation for preserving or keeping the body parts, or if he gave any indication why he did what he did?
Yeah, we talked about it, I think, before you came in, actually. But you ask about his motivation. Yes, he won't talk about that. He says he mumbled something about a pathologist friend that he was keeping him for, but he doesn't want to get that guy into trouble. He
had a few explanations, by the way. He had several explanations. He said it was for DNA purposes, but that's nonsense, because for DNA you just need a tiny sample. You don't need a whole foot. He had a lot of nonsense. He lies all the time. He has plausible-ish answers to everything, and he has a line of chat. Like, he has an answer for everything. Almost nothing stops him short. So yeah, he has kind of an answer for that, but it doesn't make sense. It makes no sense at all. No one that took the stand during the trial could make sense of the feat.
Well, apart from he's a serial killer and those were his trophies. I mean, he had a lot of the characteristics of a serial killer, trophies.
It wasn't the only set of collection he had. He also had a collection of photographs of women's genitals, which were kept and which he used to share for the amusement of himself and Jimmy Johnson, who was the janitor.
So y'all mentioned how mainstream media didn't want to cover this trial, and now that it's kind of more in the consciousness of the public, there's a lot of talk about how it's just an isolated incident and no other clinics are like this, but we know that that's not true. How do we get the mainstream media to actually cover this, or is there any advice as journalists that you could give organizations that do this work and try to collect that information to actually get coverage?
I mean, you're correct. The recent, I think it was the congressional report where they took affidavits of staff who worked down in Texas. I was reading the affidavits and I'm going, this is Gosnell. It's like they all got together at a conference and decided how to kill babies and how to mistreat women and how to hire unqualified staff. It's like, you know, they've got the centralized, it was just like Gosnell, and we know that that's in Texas. And Texas is a red state, and we know what happens in New Orleans, and we knew there's a similar place in Delaware. So, you know, when we started this, we obviously assumed this is a one-off serial killer. As journalists, we weren't involved in any movement or knew very little about it. Believe me, it's not. It's not. It seems to be almost the modus operandi. How to get that message out is.
Well, I think there's some changes happening in this country. I don't know if you've noticed that there was a presidential election recently, and I do think there's some massive changes going on. We know David Daleiden. We're friends. We've met him obviously through all of this. There's a rock star for you right there. I mean, you know, what he did, and the fact that the NBC don't have that every evening on the news and didn't have David on all the time is just beyond me, you know. But I don't think this is going to stay the same. And Kellyanne Conway, by the way, is a significantly known, I've discovered this, I mean, she's not somebody I know, but apparently she is like a well-known person in the pro-life movement. So, you know, I think she's in a rather powerful position now. So I think you might find some changes in terms of these things being spoken about. You know, we decided to make a movie and not make a documentary because we thought that was a really good way of getting this into people's consciousness. And actually, storytelling, this is what we do. You know, so I suppose everyone has a different thing that they do. Some people go to Congress, some people, you know, do things. That's not what we do. We tell stories. Stories that are in movies change the world more than anything. So people write white papers and all that stuff. No one knows about them, but people know what happens on TV. And they care about it, and it matters to them. And I'll tell you what they care about. They care about movies that say this really happened. This is based on a true story, which is exactly what we'll have. And I'll tell you, come hell or high water, our movie is going to be in movie theatres, and it will be. And people will go. People go to movies, you know. And unfortunately, I mean, it'd be nice if everything could be done in an intellectual way. It's not done in an intellectual way. And people don't vote in an intellectual way either, by the way. People vote very emotionally. Isn't that a great thing on this occasion? You know, people vote emotionally. It's very interesting. And I think conservatives, unfortunately, have been very, very good at being super, super rational. And it hasn't served them that well in getting their story out. And I think stories change the world. I was changed by a story myself. Nothing to do with abortion. I was changed by a story of a gold mine in Transylvania. It's a long story. I'm not going to start it now. But, you know, I mean, a story will change your life. Very few people are changed by white papers or by Congress, but they are changed by a story. So that's what we work at. That's what we like to do. We like to tell stories that way. And the stories we tell are true. Everyone has a job. Everyone goes a different direction. That's certainly the direction and our path in this life.
I think that is a perfect spot to leave this.
But we can sign books now.
Everybody has more questions. You're able to stick
Yeah,
around
please.
for a bit. These
When they're
books are
buying the
available
books.
for sale, $20 in cash outside. If you don't have cash, please buy them online. It will help them.
Yeah.
We just want to thank you so much. You can't imagine the personal toll.
Thank you very much.